brain, and we should move on to the ever-patient honourable gentleman, the member for North Norfolk. 10-minute rule motion, Mr Norman Lamb.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Speaker. So I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to amend the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971 to provide for the lawful production, packaging, marketing, sale, purchase, possession and consumption of herbal cannabis in specific circumstances by certain persons and for connected purposes. Mr Speaker, it's long overdue that we call time on the so-called war on drugs, launched 45 years ago by the then President of the United States of America, Richard Nixon. In that time, billions of dollars every year go straight into the hands of organised crime. Governments around the world have been corrupted by the drugs trade. Thousands upon thousands of people have lost their lives in countries like Mexico and Colombia. Profits from the drugs trade have funded terrorism, as recognised by the United Nations Security Council, and thousands of our fellow citizens every year are criminalised for using drugs. This has been a catastrophic failure. There is an urgent and compelling case for a more rational approach. Thankfully, around the world, sense is breaking out. In the United States, Colorado, Alaska, Oregon, Washington and the District of Columbia have all legalised cannabis, introducing a regulated market. They've done the same thing in Uruguay. In Portugal, they have decriminalised drug use, a move which now has cross-party support from right to left. Instead, they take a health-based approach. Drug-related deaths and sexually transmitted diseases due to drug use have dramatically decreased as a result of that change. And now in Canada, the new Liberal government there has been elected on a manifesto which commits them to legislating for the legalisation of cannabis. My plea is that in this country we should base our approach on evidence and on reducing harms rather than on fear and anxiety about public reaction. My sense is that the public are in many respects way ahead of the politicians on this subject. Now, my starting point, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that I'm instinctively hostile to drugs, legal and illegal. Tobacco kills about 100,000 people in our country every year. Alcohol causes untold damage to so many families, including its association with domestic violence, and it leads to violence on our streets. The most potent strains of cannabis also carry health risks, including psychosis and memory loss. But do we really think that we best protect people by leaving the supply of cannabis in the hands of organised crime? No criminal is interested in your welfare. They have no idea what they're buying when people choose to buy cannabis. They have no idea how potent the product is that they're buying. So-called skunk is widely available on the criminal market in every town and city across our country. Any idea that we can protect people by keeping it illegal is fanciful. No one now believes that we can actually win the war on drugs. So public policy intended to protect people from harm actually achieves precisely the opposite. And we put billions of pounds every year into the pockets of organised crime. What a spectacularly stupid, self-defeating policy. Now, some people raise the legitimate anxiety about people moving from cannabis to harder, more dangerous drugs. But that risk is self-evidently far higher when you're buying from a criminal who has no interest, or who has a direct interest in persuading you to do just that. And on top of that, we criminalise tens of thousands of people every year for the use of cannabis, blighting their careers, damaging their life chances, and restricting their ability to travel. Cannabis would be sold, I apologise, and we know that many people with mental ill health resort to cannabis as a relief from the pain that they suffer. And then we criminalise them. What a cruel, unjust policy. And we criminalise multiple sclerosis sufferers and many others who use cannabis to relieve pain. So I strongly support the End Our Pain campaign. And there's a real hypocrisy here. Whilst all those people are knocked back by criminal conviction, Others, usually more privileged, go on to build successful careers. How many members of this government have smoked cannabis whilst maintaining their support for the conviction of their fellow citizens? The Prime Minister was a reformer. It was also reported that he and others were caught smoking cannabis at Eton. He's gone on to do quite well. Yet, having signed up to a Home Affairs Select Committee report in 2002 calling for the then Labour government to initiate a discussion on alternative ways, including the possibility of legalisation and regulation, to tackle the global drugs dilemma, he then retreated, once elected Conservative leader, and now seems implacably opposed to reform. So why has the Prime Minister changed his mind? Why continue to allow our fellow citizens to be put at risk with the possibility of criminal conviction for doing exactly what he did? So my party, the Liberal Democrats, commissioned an independent expert panel to advise on a more rational approach. The panel was made up of leading experts and included retired Chief Constable of Cambridgeshire, Tom Lloyd, and the current serving Chief Constable of Durham, Mike Barton. They know better than anyone the drain on police time in dealing with possession of drug offences. Their report, published on the 8th of March, is rational, wise and balanced. It points to a very different approach. This bill seeks to implement their approach. The framework they propose is based on the primary goal of protecting and enhancing public health and community safety, with a particular focus on the health and well-being of vulnerable and marginalised groups. It is guided by evidence, it's deliberately cautious, and it proposes regular reviews. It sets out plans to establish a cannabis regulatory authority. Producers and products and sales would be licensed. Cannabis would be sold through licensed outlets. There would be mandatory provision of health advice to consumers at the point of sale. Cannabis would be sold in plain packaging. There would be a minimum age of 18 for purchase and consumption. Critically, there would be controls on potency. There would be a minimum requirement of 4% CBD, which is important in reducing risk of dependence, psychosis and memory loss. No such safeguards, of course, are available on the current criminal-controlled market. The expectation is that sales could raise up to £1 billion in tax. There would also be significant savings of police time so that they can focus on serious and violent crime. Limited amounts of home growing for personal use would be permitted, with an enforceable limit of plants per household. The scheme would also permit small-scale licensed production for membership-based cannabis social clubs, similar to those that have existed for years in Spain. These would have to be operated on a not-for-profit basis and subject to conditions including limiting the size of clubs to less than 100 adult members and limiting per-member production and supply. It would also remain a serious criminal offence to drive whilst impaired by cannabis. Madam Deputy Speaker, I understand why, for many people, the first instinct might be to be fearful of the consequences of legalising cannabis. Yet thinking through the disastrous consequences of maintaining prohibition of this drug, the profiting of criminals, the health risks because you don't know what you're buying, the criminalising of so many people, including those with mental ill health and those with multiple sclerosis, leads to the recognition that a new, more rational approach is desperately needed.
The question is, does the right honourable member have leave to bring in the bill? As many as that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Tim Farron, Nick Clegg, Tom Brake, Alistair Carmichael, Caroline Lucas, Paul Flynn, Michael Fabricant, Crispin Blunt, Peter Lilly and myself, Madam.
Norman Lamb.
Cannabis Legalisation and Regulation Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday, 22nd April.
Friday the 22nd of April.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.